Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
Hello, and welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia. I'm your host, Patty Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Allaire Schneider with Less Barriers. So welcome, Allaire. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So we've been married for almost 20 years. My husband has MS. And so we have two children. One's in college and one's almost going to be in college here soon. So I have a medical lab science background, and I ended up making an invention for my husband's wheelchair.
Very, very nice. Well, nice. Unfortunately, you had to have that story, but nice that you were able to accommodate it. So I guess, can you share a little bit of the story of your husband's journey with multiple sclerosis and how it inspired you to develop the movable wheelchair tray?
Sure. So MS is a degenerative disease. Because it affects different parts of the brain, it's considered a snowflake disease, which means it's an individual disease. So one person might have issues with, let's say, hearing and with speech and memory, and another person might have walking issues and fatigue. Fatigue is quite common. Okay. And later, as it progresses, walking issues is quite common. So basically, it's an autoimmune disease. And in the last couple of years, they've actually found there's a virus that might be the leading cause of that, and they are looking at vaccinations. And I have a little bit of information on my page about that, but that's, as a medical lab scientist, there's about 17 years difference between when research is done to when it's implemented in a doctor's office. And so in my thinking, if they know that there's this virus, which is a leading cause, that what you should do is then go out and get these two tests. Okay. If you're positive, right, then you would get what's called a titer, and you get the amount. Because you always want measurements, right? And see quantitatively what effect you're having, if any. And then if you end up being positive, you get these quantities, then you can actually do a number of different things against specifically that particular viral. And after a year, you go back, you look at your disability scores, and you look at these numbers and see what you did it affect it? And I just don't understand why they don't do this with everyone with MS. But that's a little bit of the background of MS. He, started off having fatigue and balance issues. And after 20 years, he started off remittent relapsing, went to secondary progressive. And now, he's considered progressive. And so he is in a wheelchair. And we just bought a tray, right, to help him so he can get his food and go to the bathroom quickly. And none of those things met his needs. So after about 2 years, we made this movable tray for him that just allows him to have a little bit more independence in a day, and found a number of other people that seemed like, that was something that they needed too. So we brought it to market.
Wow. I mean, it's like, again, unfortunately, you had to be in that situation, but it's very impressive that you were able to find some sort of balance there. So I guess, you kind of talked a little bit, but what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced during the early stages of your husband's diagnosis, and how did they shape your perspective on accessibility?
So I think something that really isn't talked about a lot is the emotional impact of chronic disease. If you were to become, let's say, a paraplegic, that's one thing. And after a couple of years, you may be angry and you work through those issues, and this is your new normal. The thing with MS or any other degenerative disease is that, what you're working through right now, as frustrating as it may be, in 5 years from now, that's going to be easy, and that's going to be the new hard, right? Like has a lot of impacts, and losing your independence at a much younger age than what other people are. I would definitely say, I think we both could have benefited from therapy sooner. But because it does affect the whole family. So that's something that has affected us. But I would suggest that, and then also talk to, when you have MS, there are OTs and PTs out there, and there are devices that can help you live a more independent life for longer. So, one of the things he had was, many different people have many different devices. Some of them are actually devices you can put in your car that allow a person who doesn't have a lot of fine motor movement of their feet, right? Their feet don't work correctly, that they can use their hands to drive.
Okay.
So that can give you independence for longer. There are, devices to help you put your socks on, right, that are pretty low cost. There are, shower benches, which we've just gotten, something that we just put in, and I have like directions on how I did it. It was a bidet, right? Because you don't have to get up and down and up and down.
Right.
And when you fatigue easily, or if you had arthritis and it's hard for you to, that's just something that allows you to keep your independence.
Right.
It makes life a little bit easier every day. So these are some of the things that,
Things that people normally don't even think about, it's crazy. I mean, but it's good to know that there are some things out there to help, because some of this I never even would have thought about. So good to know, and hope I never need it. But,
you never know.
I mean, you talked a little bit, but like, how has the journey impacted you personally and professionally, and what keeps you motivated to help others?
Personally, it's very much affected us. So he was diagnosed when we turned 30, before our second anniversary, when I was pregnant with our first. And then for a short while, they thought I actually had something that was scleroderma, which is an intreatable, incurable disease. For 3 weeks, we're waiting to get the blood work from that. And then my husband came back to me and told me a few different symptoms he was having, which are very much neurological. And it was over Christmas. So we had to wait 2 weeks before we could get back to our home state to get the testing. And the day we got back, which was January 1st, 2005, I went to his GP and said, we need an MRI. Like, this is, this and this are not, these are neurological issues. And one-sided weakness and different things. And she said, yep. And they got the MRI, and we were supposed to go in on Friday. I was supposed to find out if I had scleroderma on Friday. And on Tuesday, they called and said, you need to come in for this neurological appointment on Wednesday, which was never a good thing. So I called my doctor. I said, tomorrow we're going to find out, probably he has MS. Please tell me I don't have scleroderma. And she says, no, you don't. And the next day he did have MS. He was diagnosed. And then he went to a massive relapse, and I became very preeclamptic. So we ended up having to have my daughter 2 weeks early. I lost 70 pounds in 7 days because the preeclampsia was so bad. The pulmonologist said, I've never seen that much water on someone's lungs, and I honestly don't know how they didn't collapse. And I've had some lung issues and different things since. The fact that I bled out for 45 minutes, that I lived through it, was, probably a big thing. But the big thing was that our daughter came out healthy. That was the big thing, which was good. And then we had our son a little bit later. But it was one of these things where he had a relapse every 3.5 months for the first 10 months. And so then he kind of went to a massive depression. But he didn't really want to talk to anybody, right, or get counseling. And then he said, I'll let you do whatever you want to do. And I've been reading PubMed research. And so I had went through, and I'd seen 25% of our MS, which is remittent relapsing MS. Those symptoms are from inflammation, and that sugar is inflammatory and all these other things. This is way back, 2006. So we put him on a, no gluten, low dairy, lots of fruits and veggies kind of diet. And I gave him vitamin D and B12 even back then, because D, if you had a high enough level, reduced your chances of having MS by like 62%.
Okay.
So I figure if you already have it, that might help with disease activity, and at the worst case, it wouldn't hurt. And within 7 weeks, he lost 15 pounds. The black circles under his eyes went away. He was going a mile faster for a mile longer with dramatically less foot drop. And then he went 4.5 years before the next relapse, and that was when we moved to a different state, and he went to a different work. And stress is very much a big trigger for autoimmune disease in general.
Okay.
So that was helpful. But then, my son ended up having eczema really bad, and I had to do some PubMed research for that. And the Townsend letter for doctors and patients, May 2003, I think it was like 10 pages, and 2 pages went over how probiotics might help with that. And so then I started PubMed research on, some make B vitamins, some make K vitamins. It reduces inflammation. And so I started giving him probiotics, but when he didn't have it, my son would huge flares. So then I went through and I started looking at if the seeds keep dying, it ain't the seeds, it's the garden. There's something in the environment. And so I ended up giving him basically strawberry daiquiris without alcohol, but with spinach.
Okay.
Higher pH is, what I was kind of thinking, because bacteria need temperature and pH are a big deal. And he didn't have any changes in temperature, but maybe we looked at his pH. And nowadays what that was is it's prebiotics, they call that, okay? But it was that, and what that allowed him to do is go without probiotics for a certain period of time and still not flare. So when you had nursing, you actually give your baby gets probiotics through your milk, but that's not in formula.
Right, okay.
And so, so we did that, and then my daughter had RLS, which is restless leg syndrome, and so it took me 4.5 years to figure that out. And in between, I was diagnosed with Crohn's, and ended up having a perforated bowel a couple years ago. So in doing all this research, I went back and got my medical lab science degree. And we've done a number of things, like I said, that have actually helped our family with a number of their health issues. And then the latest thing we did was this tray. It took us about 2 years. And I did stress testing on it with the mechanical engineer and that kind of thing, and then brought it to market. But that's kind of like, it's not just my husband's health, the overall health of our family has pretty much changed the trajectory of where my life was going.
Well, two things. One, it gets a little crazy where people, they joke about everybody, WebMD is your doctor, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, we don't have much choice sometimes. You have to do all the research and everything because the doctors, sometimes they're just guessing. Like I've had my own issues where the doctors, I figured out answers to stuff that I'm like, I spent so many years of fighting for one thing. And if you would have just asked this one question, we could have figured this out ages ago. But also, that was the one thing. And, it gets a little tricky where we research a lot where everybody says with the environment, like half of the things that are out there now between autism, ADHD and whatnot, these people say, oh, we have a lot more of them now because there's more testing now. I don't know if that's it, because when you mentioned like environmental, how much stuff is banned in other countries, but okay here? These are things that we never heard of I think somebody said 1 in every 5 kids is like autistic now. This was unheard of decades ago. Where is this coming from? And it's kind of funny, like where I live, I always like sink water. I just like that better than bottled water sometimes. And I remember my husband saying, don't drink that out here. I said, why? Whatever's thrown into the water, he's like, we're very high in cancer rates. It's from the water you're drinking because of whatever's in the soil and whatnot. So I had to kind of stop doing that. But it's like, how is this even allowed? So I'm sure like dementia and whatnot are in my family. And I did the 23andMe test, not because I care about, my hierarchy, but I'm told that you can test for these sort of genes, and everything it says in there is, but environmental factors and whatnot can change. It doesn't mean that what we're telling you is accurate. It just says because you might not have the gene, but environmental factors can give you this. Like, wow, this is the world we're living in. So I'm sure that some of this plays a big part in everybody's health nowadays, but just never good either way.
I think with doctors, in the United States, vets are required to have nutrition classes. And I've never spoke to a doctor, an MD yet, that was required to have nutrition in their health classes. So it's not really preventative health care. And the other thing is there's things that doctors, so they don't teach them about good health and nutrition. And they don't tell them, the other thing is so coming from a lab, the numbers they give you for your normal ranges from your doctor, those are accurate results. However, they are not based on a healthy subset of the population. They are based on 95% of people in that area. So if it's sick in that area, that is a sick norm, and you will never get to healthy. So like, one of the things I have on the site is a little paper, and it goes over the PubMed research on, if we were all to get our levels of vitamin D3 up to 52 or higher, we could reduce breast cancer in half, colorectal cancer in half, RA by 38%. And if you have diseases like MS and lupus and RA, you reduce your disease activity. If you have already had breast cancer, basically you increase your survival rate. Right. By getting those numbers higher. And in Michigan, a lot of places, like 23 to 50 is what the quote unquote normal range is. Well, you'd have to be in the top 5% of the population to get that healthy goal, right? And you have to also know that when you take D3, you should take it with K2. D3 increases blood calcium.
Okay.
too high of blood calcium for long periods of time is atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries risk. K1 is clotting. All your doctors know about that. They usually don't know about K2. I mean, K2 actually gets the blood calcium out, right? So you're getting all these benefits while not having the atherosclerosis risk. So you take them together. But you have to have nutrition classes. You have to go through PubMed, right? And I put out a paper, and it got published in a medical journal for curcumin, right? And because I have Crohn's, and Remicade is it's a very expensive medication, and it can cause lupus-like symptoms. It can also cause lupus, which is a different autoimmune disease. But if you take it, when that medication, they start seeing what's called IL-1, which is an interleukin-1. When they see that start spiking, that usually means that the drug is losing effectiveness. So the medication will no longer work, right? Okay. Well, curcumin actually has a lot of benefits, a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits. So IL-1, TNF-alpha, which is what Remicade is trying to target, like 15 other different chemicals, while actually being beneficial for your liver, and reducing your cancer risk for not just prostate, but colorectal cancer, which when you have Crohn's, it's an IBD, you're at a higher risk for that. So why would you not take an over-the-counter that's cheap and effective, reduce all these, including IL-1, and could you possibly extend the life of your medication being effective for you? Mm-hmm. Like, there are things that we could be doing together, but I agree with you. I mean, preventive health, right? And actually having this knowledge out there, which a lot of doctors don't, because they're not given that, right? You don't make money keeping people healthy. Okay. And the other is, like you said, with the water, we have really excellent, I actually worked in an environmental lab for a while, excellent people in water quality. But you can only do with what you can do with, right? And so if you have infrastructure and that allows you to affect the turbidity and the coliforms, which are basically certain bacteria in the water, okay. But what they don't tell you are the things they can't do anything about, which is medications. So maybe between 40 to 90% of the medication you took orally will be peed out. Okay, so when you're talking things like antidepressants or antipsychotics, or when you're talking antibiotics, so then you have a diluted antibiotic within this water, and now you've basically made a soup for the next superbug, right? That allows them to come, and we're not really doing enough about those kind of things. But that's not due to our water infrastructure people. You have to you have to improve the infrastructure. And there are things you can do like micro voltage within water, and a few other things that can destroy and kill, right? UV light and heat, all different kinds of things. And some people in some cities, they've invested in that, and they are doing maybe one of those things, and among the things that they've been doing for many decades, okay? And it's a lot of hard work. But if they could update that infrastructure to include a number of these newer technologies, there would be more that we could do for water quality. But you have to, and I agree with the whole European, over their GMOs, right? Our GMOs aren't tested even in animals, let alone humans. And there are certain things like the corn borer, and there's an antigen that they know kills these pests, right? And so they actually have spliced part of bacteria genetics into this corn, and it produces this antigen and it kills these pests. Okay, but what is it doing in humans? Could it be contributing to autoimmune disease? Could it be? We don't know, because they haven't done testing. And I just feel like there should be the testing at bare minimum. And in certain places in Europe, that's what they said. There isn't, so they were trying to ban it. But the thing with the farmers, and I feel for them, is they're forced to buy this seed that's higher priced, even though they don't have to have it every year. And once there's a lot of problems. I won't.
No, I know. It's a shame because so many people lose faith in the medical field just because of, just another example. My stepfather wasn't feeling well. He was having trouble, shortness of breath. After a year of back and forth in the hospital, they were giving him a pacemaker. The man was 77 years old, 83 years old, giving him a pacemaker, blah, blah, blah. Turns out he had pancreatic cancer. You opened this man up 3 different times for something that wasn't even remotely close to what his issue was. But it's like a guessing game. And it's like, and this is what our life's in your hands. It's like, it's a shame.
Here, I would say this. In other countries, right? There are just certain scans that they do. If they did a full body scan when you're 50 and then at 60, okay? And if you have cancer, okay, that's nice that it's in your liver. Do a full body scan and rule out it being in other places, right? But right now we have insurance companies who do not have medical degrees dictating to doctors what tests that they can do. I say I'm a medical lab scientist. Okay, great. But I can't script a medication and I can't tell someone they have to get this test or, they are not allowed to get this test. How is it that an insurance company who doesn't have the MD degree is allowed to do that? It should be the doctors who dictate, who have the medical degree, what tests get done. I'm just throwing out some things that in legislation, we could change that.
We live in a world where money talks, unfortunately. It's not what's in the best interest of the people. It's who's making the most money. It's sad.
But I think if more people understood that, right, then they could maybe lobby to their elected officials and say, why is it I'm not allowed without a medical degree to practice medicine? How is it my insurance companies are?
Yeah, 100%.
How is that legal? Right. And maybe we get, certain organizations who have, I know ACLA, there's all these different acronyms for different legal entities. And maybe one of them kind of comes across as goes, let's bring this to bear and change the system so that it behooves the people. And if we start doing preventative health care, that's more cost effective and we could start affording our health care.
But like you said, they don't want you healthy because then they're not making any money. It's a shame. So I guess going back to the tray for your husband, what was the process like to bring the product from concept to reality? And were there any specific significant obstacles that you had to overcome?
So it was about, I would say 2.5 years, and the initial prototype was really made for him, right? Because he didn't, we purchased something and he would go to the refrigerator and he would actually have to take it off, which means you can't use it. And, they have the flip trays, but then he would have to flip it out of the way, which means then he couldn't use it. And then you would, I'd set him all up, he'd be eating. And then, if you're in a wheelchair, a lot of people have incontinence issues. And anxiety makes those things kind of worse. And so then you'd be like, okay, I'm eating. And then all of a sudden, right. But then you'd have to backtrack to a table, take everything off, a ham sandwich or whatever, and coffee, and then take the tray off and then go to the restroom. And when those extra couple minutes, right, then if you have an accident, now you have another 45-minute problem. So we ended up just throwing it out. And we started with, I went and I got some PVC pipe and some wood and some scraps and stuff. And we put some together with our 3D printer. And at first it was one thing, and then it morphed into another, and then it morphed into another. And then I started doing some 3D prints. And after about 2 years, it completely changed. We got a provisional patent. I went to a mechanical engineer. And then you have to go through and you have to find out what material are you going to use, because 3D printing is different than the actual mold processing, which is like an automotive part, right? It's quality. Then you have to find a plastic injection molder that will do it, who will do it at lower volumes. And you have to find a packaging place, and you have to find, and your web is even, okay, are you going to use Shopify? Are you going to use, a different online source, right? And then you have to look at sales tax software and accounting software and blah, 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 blah. Like there's a ton of these, business things. So I gotta say, there's a place, it's called SCORE, Senior Core of Retired Executives. They are free mentoring. And I highly suggest that to anyone in the United States to go to them, because that was like one thing was like in the contracts. I'd never done, plastic injection mold contracts. And so there was this gentleman, Bill, very nice guy. Thank you, Bill. And he was like, when you have these contracts, make sure that you put in there that they have to pay for the changes. So if, let's say, they make an error in the mold, they are actually on the hook for then fixing that, not you. And I made sure that got in the contract. Now, there was a change or two that I asked for that I had to pay for, but there was some issues that they had and that they were then on the hook for, not me. And that's a lot of money, right? I mean, an extra $8,000 or an extra, so, and there's another gentleman named Ken who's been helping me with finance, like putting together, P&Ls and balance sheets, which I'm not familiar with any of that at all. But we've actually got a couple hundred of these things in the garage, and
Nice.
it was definitely, 2.5 years in development, and actually going out and getting feedback. And I'd say that for anybody, if you're gonna, go through an invention, don't do it in a vacuum. I mean, my husband user tested everything we had,
Right.
but even at that, there's only the issues he was having. And when I went out and get feedback from other people, like, oh, if you change this would help this population, which she doesn't have that problem yet. If you change this would allow for this. So go to people, ask them their opinion. And something that is a change isn't negative. It's understanding, the full needs of people.
Right. Yeah. Because like you say, not everybody has the same, same symptoms and whatnot. So you have to accommodate a wide variety. So that makes sense. Yeah. I guess like you spoke a little bit about it, but I guess what specific gaps in the market did you identify that led you to create the innovative wheelchair tray? And how does your tray differ from others?
So there's nothing else out there that you could use standing up. There's nothing you can use as a side tray. So this actually, there's no knobs on it. Okay. So if you have a degenerative disease or arthritis, that kind of thing is some people can't even use it, and if they do, it's so hard to use it more than once or twice in a day. It makes it a pain to use it.
Right.
And anyways, so it doesn't have any knobs. It's height adjustable. You can use it as a side tray. It actually slides in 2 different ways, and it is in 3 different angles. So it's ambidextrous, so you can use it on either side. So my husband really likes the fact that you can just go up to a countertop, you slide it to the side, you flip it 90 degrees, and it's a side tray, so you can go directly up to a counter, get your, let's say, soup out of a microwave, hot, put it on the table, not your lap,
Right.
and then wheel it to a table without burning yourself. Okay, there isn't anything like that. Okay, if you are eating, I gotta go. Guess what? Go directly to the bathroom.
Right.
Slide it to the side, grab your grab bars, and you go. The ham sandwich doesn't go on the floor. You don't have to backtrack for 2 minutes. It's the only one that does that. So those are some of the innovations that we've made.
Nice. Very, very good. I guess, like, how does the less barriers wheelchair tray differ from other products for manual wheelchair users?
So the things that were out there were really, the 2 main ones were something that has knobs on either side. And you manually have to take it off every single time. They're just, they're a complete pain. We bought that because that's what was available to us. Okay. And again, he couldn't use it to get food. You had to remove it to be able to get into food, and then you can't use it. And again, when you're trying to do anything, it takes a while to put it on and it takes a while to take it off. Then there's the flip arms. The flip arms, those are, again, okay, so you go up and you need to get in and get something, but you have to flip it out of the way to get it, and then try to bounce on your lap, and then try to flip it back. But if you need a second thing, then how do you do it?
Right.
You can't. And you still have to, then if you, let's say, are eating off it, which is they're much smaller, you would have to still either backtrack to a table and take it off, or put your ham sandwich on the floor when you got in the bathroom. Like, it's not, none of them can be used as like a side cart.
Okay.
Right. And none of them, so you can't use them while you're standing. You can't use them Ours actually, it slides not just back and front, like you're eating on it, and then you slide it away from you. When you rotate it the 90 degrees away from you, it's actually slidable as a side cart. And then you can also have it 90 degrees towards you. So my husband actually eats in a way where the tray actually slides towards his gut.
Okay.
So his food doesn't go into his lap. It actually goes into the tray.
Okay.
And it has a pocket system on it, which allows for stand-up silverware.
Okay.
Which I think is the only one that does that. So if you need to know anything about OT, to grasp silverware off from a horizontal plane is much, much harder than when it's vertical.
Okay.
Which wasn't a problem for him now, but might be in the future.
Right.
So that's why we made the box a little wider for that. But it also allows you to put your cell phone, your
Right.
iPad, whatever you need, and have a place for your coffee or your water bottle. So, yeah, that's how it's a little bit different.
Oh, good. I mean, obviously, some people just create things, but you always say, well, how, what's the pain point you're solving? And you lived it. So, which is great. And I guess, how has the product improved your husband's daily life and independence? And can you share any specific examples?
So I talk specifically about getting his food and going to the restroom, right? So if you can go directly to the restroom, slide it out of the way, grab the grab bars. That's another 45-minute problem you don't have in a day because you didn't have an accident. For my husband, he's actually said, it reduced his anxiety about it, right? Because then he wasn't worrying about it all the time. But yeah, he had a tray with his walker before he went to a wheelchair, and then he went to the wheelchair, and with everything they had, he wasn't able to get stuff or be in his lap, and he'd spill it. So this just allowed him, he can go get whatever he wants. I mean, he's taking a half gallon of milk, putting it on the side of it, done his thing, whatever. And yeah, but he'll always tell me when I bring this up, he's like, you always talk about the food in the bathroom. He's an engineer. I have all my paperwork, and I can go from one room to the next, and it's not falling on the floor. Because even they have these little graspers, and it's to grasp paper off from a floor with those, it's very hard. And so he was constantly, that's something that really kind of it frustrated him a lot. And so with this, you just put it on it's got a rim on it, put it on top, no more falling all over the place. So these are the things that helps him every day.
I guess the biggest thing is his independence, which is, we all can say it, but until you're in that position of somebody has to do things for you, it's like you don't realize the toll that takes, the emotional toll. I mean, I'm like a very independent person too. And thank God I'm not in that position. But if I was, that would devastate me that someone has to do everything for me, I guess.
But how do you age in place? There's a lot of people that, don't have a spouse or their spouse isn't there a lot of the time. So again, as a person who walks like I can, and you go up to the microwave, you get your soup, okay, and you just grab it and you take it to a different room. If you had a wheelchair and you're trying to move it with your, manually move the wheels, how do you get that hot soup, right? And another thing, our tray has a rim on it, so it's not going to just spill off and fall off. So again, getting your own food every day, being able to choose the restroom very quickly, so you don't have, because if you're alone trying to take care of a mess after the fact, again, that's why I say a 45-minute problem, because you have to do everything you need to do, and then you have to go clean up, and then you've got to put new clothes on, and that's just and when you have MS and some of these other diseases, in the autoimmune disease, there's a lot of fatigue. It's just this, oh my God, and so for you to be able to, I'm hoping people to stay in their own home, right? That they can do that on their own, because people can afford to have, let's say, someone come in and help them get their groceries or go to the doctor's appointment, once a week or something, but to come in every day and help them with their meals, a lot of people don't have access to that. So if you can make that easier, then it does help them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what feedback have you received from others who've used the wheelchair tray, and how has it impacted their life?
Well, we just started selling it. So I've had a number of people, when I went to OT conventions, and they came up to me and were like, oh my God, we've been looking for something like this. For years, we've been trying to generate something like this for our patients. This is awesome. Where can we get this? And that was back in the spring when we just had the 3D prints. We hadn't, actually had the molds made yet. And we just had the molds made in mid-November. And then a week and a half later, my husband had a pulmonary embolism and almost died. So we just got out of the hospital with that. So then we have all the Thanksgivings. So I'm just now getting back into par. So we'll be selling that. But I've had a number of people who came up to me who were in different circumstances, and we are trying to, the money we make off from this is actually going to go to several other inventions that will help other populations, because they were like, can you do this for me? Can you? And I'm like, we actually have plans to do something like that. And we need something like this. And I'm like, I get it, but I got to make the money off the molds for this. And then, but I've had several people, we have sold some, so we will hopefully in the next couple weeks get some reviews for those. But from the people the OTs that we talked to, they were like, we've been looking for something like this for a long time.
You should get people who use it to do videos of, because that's great for your like kind of case studies that show it works. It's real people. It's not, a pipe dream. You're actually, people are using this and they could show how useful it is. That'd be a good, good. And then people could give feedback on, what else you think. And, it kind of builds momentum from there.
So far, yeah, the people who've seen it, who actually work with people in wheelchairs, have all like, oh my gosh, this is, yes, we just actually, so my husband, he does have MS. It's progressive disease. And he did have these clots that almost killed him. And so I've been asking for if we could get a stand-up wheelchair for him. Because a lot of your clotting issues with it's heart attack, stroke, or PE, right? The clot in different parts of your body. Those if you're sitting all the time like people are in wheelchairs, that puts you at a much, much higher risk.
Right.
So if we can do that, the other thing is by standing, a lot of people don't understand this. It increases the circulation to your bowels, to your liver, and to your pancreas. And if you don't have that, it actually really reduces the lifespan of people. Okay. So just doing even an hour and a half of, being stood up while you're brushing your teeth and having your coffee and that kind of thing can make a really big difference to your quality of life long term. But I was talking to some of the people there about this thing and the stand-up wheelchair, but he came in with this manual wheelchair and it had the tray on it. And within my husband's like, within 30 seconds, they didn't even care what my name was. For 15 minutes, they're asking us all these questions about, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, where can we just get this on Amazon? Can we? And I'm like, no, we're selling. What do you mean? Like, no, we made it and we're selling. Really? Like, and then they're taking it off. And this OT, about 45 minutes into our meeting, just runs into the room and goes, are you the ones that have the tray? And it was like looking at it. So like, and these people deal with this all the time. Right. And that was their response to it. So
that's one of the things that unless you're in that situation to see the need for it, you wouldn't have it. It'd be like, so you have a tray, big deal. But until it physically affects you, be like, oh my God, this is a godsend, Nice.
Well, just even having the pocket in the front. It's like for people to get into their back pockets or the front pockets, that even that's kind of hard, and they can't get into they have backpacks, but how do you get into the backpack? And their legs usually don't work as well. So trying to get underneath the wheelchair is kind of hard too. So having that pocket in the front, it's kind of like having a little purse. Right? Like a storage area, and you can have so it's
a crazy thing where you don't realize until something affects you. Like I remember my nail got caught in a door at one point, so I couldn't use this finger. Even just going to a bank, signing something, you don't realize what you need. And then I had my foot in a cast one time. And same in the morning, I want to get up and make like a bagel and a tea. How do I get it with crutches from here? Like these are just, and my situation, nowhere near MS, but it's just until you're in a situation, you don't realize the necessities you need and how something so simple to everybody else is like huge to someone who needs it. So good. I'm glad that I'm not glad, but I'm glad that you're talking to other people to understand what it is they need and how you can help them with that. So I guess what advice would you give to caregivers, family members, individuals navigating similar challenges to improve accessibility and quality of life?
A couple of things, like I said, that the one thing that, and I'm in, towards the end of this, but I both of us should have done it earlier, is get into some kind of counseling. Because it does affect a lot of things. And getting some kind of support system. So we were in a different state. We didn't have any family, really didn't have any friends. And I did start making a couple friends, and we moved again to a place where it didn't have. And so if you can get some kind of support network, even if that's an online support system, that does matter. Also go to, like I've given this trade to a couple places. There's one, it's called disability advocates, and a lot of states have them. And when I dropped that off, it was really cool. And I stayed for a while and looked at, and I took pictures. They have a demo apartment. And so you can go in there and you can look at like, how do you get drawers that come down? Different kinds of dishwashers that are more accessible for people in wheelchairs. How you would set up your shower system with the bars and different things. That kind of stuff, it's free and available. I don't think a lot of people know about that,
Right.
but sometimes having, again, like a bidet
Right.
or a shower bench or some dressing aids can make a really big difference, right? And because if you do have a caregiver, their backs, right? Like how much, there's a really cool thing. It's called a Sarah Assist. And the one at the hospital was like $4,000 and you could take a 500-pound person. But the cheapy stuff is like 400.
Okay.
And it helps people to transfer. It's really very helpful. If you knew about a few of these things, the physical aspect can be helped, right? And if you had a few things like dressing aids or a tray, right, that people can get their own stuff when you're not there, that is also, I feel, again, I come from a rural area and there's a lot of people who are alone in their homes in an isolated area, and day to day they have to do a lot of things on their own. And if you can, just a few of these devices can make a really big difference.
Yeah, I agree with the talking to people, groups, because one, they could offer you things that you didn't, like advice like you that you didn't even think about, but also, they can sympathize with you. Like you could say, oh my God, this is what we're struggling with. They could say, you know what, we were struggling with the same thing. Did you try this? And just when you're having a bad day, they sympathize with you because they've been there. So I agree, having a support system or support network is huge for any type of situation, but especially, one like this.
I mean, that's what, I'm not a man. And so like, talking about cats and that kind of things. And as a guy, which one did you find to be most effective without being painful? Or, there's different issues with different ones. There's indwelling and there's, condom cats, and getting those kind of perspectives in advance, knowing what our options are before we go in, and then being able to discuss with a medical professional. Because the medical professionals, again, if you're talking to a 40-year-old doctor, they don't have all these problems. And they aren't taught about all these different things. So they wouldn't even know about it, right? It's not that they're trying to be bad, and they have 5 minutes to talk to you, right? So, talking to some of these groups, it's can be very beneficial.
Anything else you want to talk about that we didn't already cover, though?
So I guess, could I talk a little bit about MS?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that they have found, I had my husband tested in 2018, and he was actually tested positive for both, was the Epstein-Barr virus, okay, and the antibodies to it. So because I'm in a medical lab science class, I got to thinking, in medicine, and you have to do this, the 95% rule, and that is 95% of the rule, it's a horse. It's don't look for a zebra, right? But when you have an autoimmune disease, you already are in the minority. And so when you have antibodies, you have this is called an IgM, like the paramedic. They're out quick and they're gone quick. Okay, and then you have the IgG, so you've dropped off at the hospital and the nurses and doctors take care of you for 2 or 3 weeks, right? That's when you're in an active disease. And then all of a sudden you'll find that antibody, that soldier that works exactly right against that bad guy. Okay, once you find that, then you keep what's called a memory or a vaccination cell around. Okay, so you never get that same cold again. Okay, that's how it's supposed to go. And so what they'll do is they'll test for this memory or vaccination cell and go, oh, well, you've had it, you cleared it, you're fine. The issue is what if you didn't actually clear it? So my husband actually has something called hemochromatosis, which is it's the most common genetic disorder there is. It's of the gut, and you can't actually clear your iron. So you have higher iron stored areas called ferritin, and viruses require iron to replicate.
He's got access.
Right. So, and he's in a very stressful job, which depresses your immune system. So you have low good guys and high bad guys. Right? You're in a viral happy state. So maybe that's the reason some of these people can't clear that virus. And the longer you have the virus, the more of the damaging antibodies. In this case, it's kind of weird. It's not the virus that does the damage, it's the antibodies. Okay, so I had him tested for these things. He should not have been positive. He was positive for both.
Wow.
Okay, and this virus is very tricky. And what I didn't know at that time is that a general antiviral won't work against it. Okay, and what they've later come out with is there are some other medications that aren't normally used as antivirals that they have tested and they know are effective against EBV. And they not only know or suspect it, they actually know the mechanism of action. They know exactly how and why it is effective against the virus. One is used for acne. So these are low toxic kind of things. And so I have that on my webpage. So if you go to the catalog and go to digital downloads, it's like almost 25 references on there. Okay. And you could talk to your doctor about, my personal opinion is anybody who has MS or is going through what's called a differential diagnosis, determine if they have MS or lupus or Guillain-Barré or a B12 deficiency. Okay. They're trying to figure out which one. That should be part of the testing. And everyone who has MS should have this testing. If you have it, if you're positive for these things, get the quantity, and then you can actually do a number of different things to reduce your viral counts. And then a year later, come back and go, did you affect the virus? Did you affect the antibodies that are damaging you? And then what's your disability score? Like you could actually affect change.
Right.
So that's the little bit I would.
No, I mean, that's great because I know, like my sister has lupus and I don't know all the ins and outs of her doctors, but I can pretty much almost say they're not doing that, which again could help her,
Now that's if you have lupus. So they haven't necessarily found that for lupus, but they have found it for MS. What they have found for lupus is, so some of the things are, so lupus and MS can look a little bit alike. Okay, lupus can affect the brain, but it can also affect your liver and your skin and things that MS doesn't. MS, it's heat triggered, like it will make your symptoms come out. It does not make the disease progress faster. So if you are in a hot shower, you have a bench, okay, you're sat down, and you start having a lot of symptoms, and then you turn the shower to a cooler temperature, and within 5 minutes or 15 minutes, those symptoms start to dissipate. High indicator it's MS, and that's actually how they used to diagnose MS a long time ago. Before lupus, they actually have what's called an ANA test. And actually pop up fluorescent if you are positive for that. Lupus is something where heat isn't what affects you. The actual sunlight on your skin, because D can actually be made in your skin, okay? There's chemical reactions that go on. That actually makes your disease progress faster. So you want to stay out of the sunlight with lupus, okay? Vitamin D, and then I go back to this too, if that level is high enough, it actually reduces your lupus activity. So if you're to take D3 and get that up to something like a 50 or something, that getting that higher actually reduces your disease activity. And again, I would take that with the K2, right? Because you don't want high blood calcium. But that's really a lot of autoimmune diseases would be very beneficial if you get the higher. But D is one of these things where KAD, K, A, D, and E are fat-soluble vitamins. So you have to take them with fat for them to be absorbed in your body. They are something that can build up and can become toxic, so you want to make sure you're not overdosing in them. A lot of times doctors will say 2,000 IU of D a day, but I have talked to many number of people who, if they're deficient, that number might be between 5 and 10,000 a day. Okay, and it could take a year for your numbers to get higher. I'm just throwing that out there that's one thing. I also think, a lot of these autoimmune diseases, they have an inflammatory component. So do a low inflammatory diet, which is the lower sugar, lower red meat. It's not that you don't have any red meat. It's not that you don't have any sugar, but have an apple where it has lots of fiber. And so that blood sugar is a nice plateau and then goes down. It doesn't spike like, Snickers bar would make it spike. And then curcumin, I would definitely look at. That's the one I did a research paper on. A Dr. Gupta did, I think it was 70 pages was his systematic review that he did. And there was at least 15 different mechanisms of action. So different chemicals that it actually affects in your body to reduce inflammation. And again, all these different autoimmune diseases, that's a big component.
You're more educated than half the doctors I know. Wow, this is awesome. So how can people find out about all this on your website, and how could they get a hold of you and whatnot?
So right now I only have one digital download. It's for MS. And so you go to my website, lessbarriers.com, and click the catalog and scroll to the very bottom. It says digital downloads. I do want to have a couple others. It does have all the information on D, like the different things you have to do with it. And it has, what I did is I actually put
Okay.
right? With the citations below and a nice circled in red. It's saying here, ideal is 40 or above.
Right.
So when your doctor is saying, oh, well, normal value is 23 to 50,
Yeah.
that's just fine. Okay. and a lot of them, they're not educated to know this.
Right.
Okay. It's not high enough. And I do put this out. I say, you'll see a lot of places say steroids, right? So like cortisol, which you normally have higher in the morning, increases your blood sugar, makes you hungry, right? Blood pressure, hunger, blood sugar, all this stuff, right? It's fine. It's supposed to be higher in the morning, lower at night. But if you have chronic inflammation or chronic stress or both, you have a high level of this cortisol, which is a steroid in your body. Okay, and what steroids do is kind of think of a cell, like it has thousands of outlets all over it. Some are 2-pronged, some are 3-pronged, some might be 5-pronged, right? Okay, you can't put a 3-pronged plug into a 2-pronged outlet, right? Okay, so all the research will tell you steroids compete for receptors on these cells. You have to plug in for them to work.
Right.
Okay, so what people don't realize though is vitamin D is considered a prohormone or a steroid. So that might be part of the reason why and I put that out there, part of the reason why that your D has to be higher is because if it's trying to compete with the higher amount of cortisol that you have in your body, you have to have a higher level for it to actually function and work the way it should. And that's the only, you see these couple points like A and B throughout, steroids, they compete for receptors, blah, blah, blah. But you don't see, hey, by the way, nurses have a high rate for breast cancer. Lawyers have a high rate for breast cancer and suicide. And, these different professions, they're all these high stress, high cancer. Okay, but get your vitamin D above 52, you reduce it in half.
Yeah, you don't hear that.
Why do we not? All as women, if we just, everyone told, all our friends, right? And with the K2, so we don't have the atherosclerosis risk.
Right.
I'm just saying these things, there's a lot of research out there that is good research. It's not .coms, right? It is PubMed. There is efficacy to it. So that's what I'll put out there is we can reduce a lot of suffering in this world just by doing some preventative health.
Right. Yeah, good stuff. And how could people get a hold of you and learn more about you?
So Less Barriers, you can go to lessbarriers.com and there's an email in there, contact us at lessbarriers.com.
Nice.
But we in the next year or two, come back and look because there are a few of these other inventions we want to do. So the money we make will go into that. But honestly, if you know of anyone who has MS, I would really highly suggest getting that download. And it's research, take it to your doctor. You should be able to get those tests on your own.
Right.
Even if insurance doesn't pay for it, an MRI might be $3,000 that will never go to root cause your disease.
Right.
Is this what's affecting you when they know in research? And I have that in the citation. Leading cause of MS is this. Why aren't you getting tested to find out if it affects you?
For sure. Because they just follow the doctor. They don't know. And it's like the blind leading the blind sometimes.
Well, doctors, it's hard to keep up on everything, right? And a lot of times health insurance companies only give them 5 minutes to see a patient. And I've talked to a lot of PAs that, they were telling me, I cannot get testing done for my patients. Like I've had patients where I'm like, because maybe diabetes or whatever, like they were going to lose part of a limb. And after 6 months of fighting to get testing, and that should not be the large part of the day is just fighting with insurance companies to do their jobs. That they've said, the way I found how to deal with them is ask directly for their name and say, if they do lose this limb, I'm giving them your name and they'll know who to sue. And then all of a sudden they can get the test so that they can do the treatment. And so, I feel for doctors in that way that they're really not allowed, they're not educated, not with medications. I'm sorry, not with nutrition and not with hormones. They really aren't given hardly any education in either. And then they're supposed to fight insurance companies just to do their jobs, right? So I feel for them in that way. I feel like Cuba has way better health outcomes than we do. And it's like a pittance in the water of what we do. But they do preventive healthcare. They do prenatal vitamins with their women. They do a lot of fruits and vegetables and not a lot of eating out of boxed foods. They do vaccinations that are required. They do, HPV, if everyone got that vaccination, that they figure they can reduce cancer by like maybe up to 10%. Because if a virus gets in your cell and you don't actually kill it and it starts to replicate out, what a virus does is it injects its nucleic acid, its blueprint, its recipe for making virus into your nucleus, okay? And instead of your cell making cellular proteins, it makes viruses. If it is not killed and it starts replicating, what it ends up being is not just a human cell, it's a hybrid. It's a viral human hybrid cell. And so then sometimes it doesn't work the way it should. It just keeps replicating and it doesn't die. And the babies keep replicating and not dying. And then that's cancer. Okay. And if we could vaccinate our children against HPV and some of these other things, reduce overall cancer by 10%. Like there's a lot of things we could do. But that's science. We need more science, I think.
Exactly, 100%. Jesus. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Allaire Schneider. So thanks for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.